Paralyzed Apache woman thrown into the river by her own tribe until one cowboy dove in to save her. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from.
The sky over the Verde River hung low and heavy, the kind that promised more cold before nightfall. The land was soaked from days of rain, the earth soft and slick underfoot. Cole Madron worked along the fence line that ran near the water's edge, driving nails in a post he had cut himself last fall. The work kept his hands busy, and he needed that. Since leaving the trail-driving jobs and the life of a hired gun behind, silence had been both a comfort and a punishment. At 38, Cole had learned to live with the quiet. He'd bought this small patch of land 2 years ago after walking away from the kind of violence that left a man hollow. Out here, there were no gunfights, no debts, no names he needed to remember. Just the land, the river, and the sound of his hammer hitting wood. He'd been at it since morning, sweat and rain mixing on his brow, when the wind shifted and something faint cut through it. It was a cry. He froze, the hammer still in his hand. It wasn't the groan of a tree or an animal. It was human, a woman's voice, distant, thin, and desperate. He turned toward the river. The current moved fast, brown and swollen, carrying sticks and branches in its pull. At first, he saw nothing. Then a flicker of movement, a flash of fabric, an arm breaking the surface before being dragged under again. Cole didn't think twice. He dropped the hammer and ran. The mud nearly took his boots, the slope slick from the storm, but he pushed harder, heart pounding against his ribs. When he reached the bank, there was no sign of her, just the roar of the current. Then he saw it again, dark hair, a shoulder, the faintest motion of a hand. He kicked off his coat and duff. The water was ice cold, shocking enough to steal his breath. It clawed at his chest and throat, but he fought through, pulling hard against the current. The river was stronger than it looked. Each stroke felt heavier, slower. He spotted her again, caught against a tangle of reeds near the far bend. Her head rolled back, mouth barely above the surface. He reached her, wrapped one arm around her chest, and kicked toward shore. The weight of her wet dress dragged them down, but he held on. By the time he pulled her onto the muddy bank, his lungs burned and his arms shook from effort. He turned her over, pressing his ear close. There was a heartbeat, faint, uneven. He pushed gently on her back, forcing water out. She coughed, gasped, and pulled in a weak breath. "Easy," he said, voice hoarse. "You're safe." Her eyes opened, dark brown, glassy, searching. She tried to move, but her legs didn't respond. Cole saw panic in her face before she realized it herself. Her hands slapped at the ground, trying to push up, but her lower body stayed still. Her breathing quickened, turning shallow. "It's all right," he said quietly. "You're hurt. Don't fight it." She stared at him, lips trembling, trying to speak. What came out was broken English mixed with Apache. "No walk, no walk." He understood enough. The words hit him harder than he expected. He'd seen men crippled in falls or shot off horses. How fast fear could turn into shame. She was young, maybe mid-20s, her face striking even under the mud and cold. Long black hair clung to her neck and shoulders, her dress torn and heavy with water. Whoever she was, she hadn't fallen into the river by accident. He looked upriver, half expecting to see others, riders, a camp, anything, but there was no one. Only the wind and the gray line of trees. "You're coming with me," he said, sliding his arms beneath her. She didn't resist, just closed her eyes as he lifted her. Her body was limp, but trembling from cold. The climb back up the ridge was slow, each step fighting gravity and exhaustion. He stopped once to catch his breath, feeling her pulse faintly against his chest. She whispered something in her language, a name, maybe a prayer, and went still again. By the time they reached the cabin, his arms were numb. He kicked the door open and laid her on the cot by the wall. The fire had nearly burned out, so he threw in wood until the flames caught, filling the room with a dry snap of heat. He fetched a blanket, stripped off his wet shirt, and wrapped it around her shoulders. Her skin was pale from cold, her lips almost colorless. When she opened her eyes again, she whispered, "Why, you help." Cole looked at her for a long moment. "River's no place to die," he said simply. He gave her water, held the cup when her hands shook too much to grip it. She tried to thank him, but her voice broke halfway through. When she turned her face away, he saw the tears, small, silent, and quick. He didn't ask questions. Not yet. He only stirred the fire higher and kept watch. The storm outside had faded, leaving the sound of the river distant and low. She was asleep before long, breathing slow and shallow under the blanket. Cole sat back in the chair, staring into the fire. He felt the weight in his chest, the same one he'd carried since leaving behind the blood and noise of the trail towns. He didn't know who she was or what kind of hell she'd been thrown from, but he knew this. He wasn't going to let her die here. The wind outside shifted again, carrying the steady sound of the river that had nearly taken her. For the first time in a long while, Cole Madarin didn't feel completely alone. The morning came slow, pale light creeping through the cracks in the cabin walls. The fire had burned down to embers, and the air had the sharp chill of dawn. Cole sat in the chair where he'd slept upright most of the night, one arm resting on his leg, eyes half open but alert. He hadn't meant to fall asleep at all. When he looked toward the cot, she was awake. Ayana's eyes were open, following him quietly. Her dark hair was dry now, fanned over the pillow, and the blanket covered her up to her collarbone. She didn't speak at first. He saw her fingers move beneath the fabric, testing her hands, her arms. Then she tried to move her legs. Nothing happened. Her face went still. He watched, unsure if he should look away or stay. She pressed her palm hard against her thigh, then again, harder, until frustration tightened her jaw. Finally, she turned her head toward him. "You say I safe," she said, voice soft but clear. "I not safe. No walk, no tribe, no home." Cole stood and poured water from the tin pitcher into a cup. "You're alive," he said, setting it beside her. "That's safe enough for now." She didn't drink. "Why you safe?" He hesitated. That question had sat in his chest since the night before. "Didn't think about it," he said finally. "Saw you in the river. Couldn't just stand there." Her eyes searched him like she didn't quite believe him, or maybe she didn't understand the kind of man who would act without reason. After a long pause, she whispered, "My people throw me. Say I bring bad spirit. I fall from horse. Spine break. They say curse." He felt something twist in his stomach at her words. He'd known Apache camps during his scout days, seen how they lived hard under pressure from both the army and hunger. But the idea of them turning on one of their own made his hands clench. "You fell from horse," he said. "That's no curse." She didn't argue. Her gaze went back to the fire. Cole moved around the small cabin, keeping himself busy. He set beans to soak, then went outside to split wood. Each strike of the axe cleared his thoughts. He thought about her story, about how someone could be left to drown because of fear or superstition. He thought about the weight of her when he'd carried her up the ridge, light as a child, but heavy with something he couldn't name. Inside, she listened to the sounds he made, the steady rhythm of chopping, the door creaking, the fire popping. When he came back in, she was sitting upright, bracing herself on her elbows. "You live alone," she said, eyes moving over the room, the tools, the saddle, the rifle by the door. "Yeah," he answered. "A while now." "Why?" He didn't look at her when he answered. "Got tired of fighting other people's battles." She watched him quietly. "You soldier." He hesitated before nodding. "Was. Long time ago. Drove cattle after that. Then stopped doing both." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was just there, like the space between them belonged to both. He handed her a bowl of warm broth, helped her hold it steady. Her hands were strong enough to lift it, but still shook. When she finished, she looked around again, her eyes settling on the window, then on him. "This your land?" "Bought it 2 years back," he said. "Built this cabin myself." She nodded slowly, taking it in. "You stay far from town." "Don't like town much," he said, his tone flat. Then he added, almost as if to himself, "Don't like people much either." That made her smile for the first time, a faint, uncertain curve of her lips. "I same." Cole looked at her for a moment. There was something in that small expression that softened the edges of the room. He didn't say it out loud, but he felt it, the way she already changed the air around him just by being there. Later, while she slept again, he sat outside on the porch steps. The sky was clear now, the air sharp and clean after the storm. He thought about what to do next. He couldn't send her to town. The folks there wouldn't take kindly to an Apache woman, crippled or not. The nearest doctor was 50 miles off, and the roads were mud. He ran a hand through his hair, staring down at the river below. He'd planned to spend the winter alone, fixing the barn roof, tending the herd, keeping his head low until spring. But things didn't always stay as planned. When he went back inside, she was awake again, eyes following him. "You think send me away?" she asked quietly. He stopped near the stove. "I don't know what I'll do yet," he said. She swallowed, her voice almost a whisper. "If you send, I die." He met her eyes. There was no drama in her tone, just truth. It landed hard in the room, heavier than any promise. Cole nodded slowly. "Then you'll stay." "For now." Something in her face eased, though she didn't smile. She just looked at him with quiet understanding, like she'd already known what his answer would be. As night fell again, the fire burned steady. She lay in the cot, her eyes drifting shut. Cole sat nearby, oiling his rifle out of habit. The cabin creaked with the cold. Neither spoke. He wasn't sure what kind of trouble might follow her, or if anyone would come looking. But as he watched her breathe, he knew one thing for certain. Whatever had started on that riverbank wasn't finished. And for the first time in years, Cole Madron felt the weight of another life depending on him, and didn't run from it. The days that followed were cold and quiet. The storm had passed, leaving the air clear and sharp, and the river below had calmed into a slow, steady current. Cole rose early each morning, the same as always, but now the sound of his boots no longer echoed alone on the floorboards. Each time he turned from the stove or the door, she was there, awake, watching him, silent but present. Ayana was getting stronger. She could sit up longer, move her arms more freely, even drag herself short distances along the floor when she needed to. It wasn't much, but it was something. Cole had built a frame from scrap lumber to help her prop herself beside the fire. He didn't say it, but he admired her grit, the way she refused to be useless even when her body failed her. That morning, as he poured coffee into a tin cup, she broke the silence. "You fix wood every day," she said, her English halting but steady. "You know rest." "Work keeps me straight," he replied. "Straight." He glanced at her, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Means I don't lose myself." She studied him a moment, then nodded. "You lose before." He froze, caught off guard by her directness. He told her little about himself, only that he used to work with cattle, that he'd been a soldier once. He hadn't said why he lived out here alone. "Yeah," he said after a pause. "Lost enough." She didn't press him, but the look she gave said she understood more than most would. She knew something about being cut off from what you were. Later that day, while the wind rose outside, she asked another question that had been hanging since the day he found her. "You not afraid?" He looked up from mending a bridle strap. "Of what?" "Me," she said simply. "My people. You help Apache woman. Many white men no do that." Cole set the strap aside, rubbing the back of his neck. "I worked near Apache lands before. Saw plenty of bad on both sides. You don't strike me as trouble." Her eyes held his for a moment, testing the weight of his words. "I not curse then." He shook his head. "You're just hurt, Ayana. That's all." Something small changed in her face, then, like a wall lowering just enough for him to see behind it. It wasn't quite a smile, but the tension that had lived in her jaw since that night began to ease. By evening, the snow started to fall, light at first, then heavier, covering the ridge in white. The cabin filled with the smell of wood smoke and beans simmering on the stove. Cole helped her to the small table, setting her on a stool he'd braced with blocks so she wouldn't slide. She stirred the pot while he cut bread, the two of them working in silence. Listeners might have wondered what kept them from speaking more, but words weren't what either of them trusted. Cole had spent years around men who lied for a living, outlaws, officers, ranchers who'd smile while cheating you blind. Words were easy. Work wasn't. Ayana understood that without needing it explained. Every small motion between them, her hand steadying the bowl, his arm reaching past her for the kettle, spoke what talk couldn't. After they ate, she said softly, "You not asked me name before." He looked at her across the table. "Didn't think you were ready to give it." Her lips curved faintly. "Ayana," she said, "means eternal blossom, but I think no bloom left." He looked at her for a long moment. "Still breathing, ain't you?" She nodded once. "Then maybe still bloom," he added quietly. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It settled over the room like the snow outside, soft, unspoken but alive. That night, after she slept, Cole sat by the fire again. He thought about the questions that hung over them both. What had really happened with her tribe, whether anyone would come looking for her, and what he would do if they did. He also thought about the life he'd built out here, one meant to keep him apart from everyone, and how easily she'd stepped into it without asking permission. He wasn't sure if it was pity, duty, or something he didn't yet have a name for, but he knew this much. Sending her away wasn't an option anymore. She needed care, and he needed something to care for. Outside, wolves howled somewhere deep in the valley. Inside, the firelight flickered across the walls, tracing the lines of the small cabin that had once been his only company. Now there were 2 mugs by the stove, 2 blankets near the cot, and a quiet warmth that hadn't existed here in years. As he drifted to sleep in the chair again, he heard her whisper faintly in the dark, speaking in her own tongue. He didn't understand the words, but he caught one sound. His name, said soft and grateful. For a man who hadn't been thanked in years, it felt like the start of something that scared him more than the river ever had. By the time the next week passed, the ridge was buried under snow. The cabin stood half hidden beneath the white weight, smoke curling steady from its chimney. The storm outside didn't bother Cole much. He had lived through worse, but this winter felt different. He wasn't alone anymore, and every choice he made had to account for someone else. Inside, Ayanna had settled into the rhythm of the cabin. She could move herself from the cot to the chair with her arms now, and she helped with whatever work she could reach. She sorted beans, patched torn shirts with careful stitches, and ground coffee with her hands steady against the stone. Her legs didn't move, but her spirit did, and Cole noticed it more each day. The listeners might have wondered how she managed to survive all those weeks before he found her, how a paralyzed woman could have lasted so long on her own. That morning, when the snow outside softened the light, he asked her that question for the first time. How'd you live before the river? She paused, the motion of her hands stopping over the cloth she was mending. A man from my tribe, old uncle. He brought me food for a time. When he died, they stopped. I crawled to creek for water. No food, no people. One day they come. I think maybe they bring help. They say spirit take my legs, say I make sickness. They carry me to water. Thoreau. Her voice didn't shake, but the words did something to him. He tightened his jaw, staring at the floor for a long while. They thought killing you would fix them, he said quietly. Yes, she said, but I still hear. He nodded, meeting her eyes. Damn right you are. It was the first time she'd heard him curse, and something in his tone made her lips twitch, the faintest spark of amusement, like life reclaiming space where pain used to live. That evening, as he chopped wood outside, he saw a shape down the ridge, a horse, moving slow through the snow. His hand went to his gun by instinct. Travelers rarely came this way unless they were lost or looking for something. The horse stopped near the fence line, a man dismounting, wrapped in a long coat and scarf. Cole waited until he got close enough to see his face. It was old Caleb Trask, the trader who ran a small outpost 15 miles east. Didn't expect to see anyone out this way, Cole said, lowering his guard. Caleb nodded, stamping snow from his boots. Had a delivery for some folks down the river. Figured I'd check if you were still breathing. Cole smirked faintly. Still am. Caleb looked past him toward the cabin. Heard a rumor out in town. Said you took in one of them Apache women. True. Cole's jaw tightened. Who's saying that? Couple drifters in Pine Ford. Saw smoke from this ridge and said maybe you weren't as alone as you used to be. Cole didn't answer right away. He just said she needed help. That's all. Caleb gave him a long look, part curious, part cautious. Help's one thing, trouble's another. Folks out there don't forgive easy. I didn't ask for their forgiveness, Cole said. Caleb nodded, understanding enough not to push further. He handed over a small sack of coffee and salt. You're going to want to keep that fire strong. Weather's turning bad again. When Caleb rode off, Cole stood there for a long time, watching the horse disappear into the white. The unease sat heavy in his chest. If men in Pine Ford were already talking, it meant someone had seen Ayanna, or would soon. He went back inside, brushing snow from his shoulders. Ayanna looked up from her chair. Someone come. He hesitated before answering. Trader, just passing through. She studied his face, knowing there was more. You worry, she said quietly. Cole didn't deny it. This land's not kind to strangers. Word spreads fast. Folks in town, most of them don't see right from wrong when it comes to your people. She looked down, her voice calm but firm. "I not go back." He stepped closer, resting a hand on the table beside her. "You won't. I'll see to that." Something in his tone carried a weight he hadn't meant to reveal. She looked up, her eyes catching his, and for a long moment neither spoke. The fire popped between them. He felt something shift, something quiet but real, a line crossed, a promise made without words. Later, when she slept, Cole sat near the window, watching the snow drift against the glass. He thought about what he'd said. He meant it, every word. But the truth was, he didn't know how to protect her if men came asking. The town barely tolerated him, a quiet man with no family and a past he never spoke of. An Apache woman under his roof would stir the kind of talk that never ended well. He looked over at her sleeping form, her face soft in the glow of the firelight, and felt a pull he didn't know how to name. Something heavier than pity, deeper than duty. She had become part of the place, part of his days. The cabin didn't feel hollow anymore. The silence between them wasn't empty now. It was full of something steady, something alive. Cole leaned back, the fire's warmth brushing his face. He had lived years with no one to answer to, no reason to stay. But as he watched her breathe, he realized the thought of her being taken, or leaving, was something he couldn't accept. Outside, the wind howled across the ridge, sweeping through the trees like a warning. Inside, the man who once swore never to care again had already broken his own vow without noticing. The wind carried harder the next morning, driving sheets of snow against the cabin walls. Cole was up before dawn, pulling on his coat and stepping outside to check the livestock. He moved slow, every step sinking deep in the drift. The storm had buried most of the fence line and left the roof heavy with white. His mind stayed busy with work, but under it all was that same gnawing thought. If the trader could find his way here, so could others. When he came back in, the fire had died low. Ayanna sat awake in her chair near the stove, wrapped in a blanket, hair loose over her shoulders. She looked tired but alert. He noticed the way her eyes followed him, studying the tension in his movements. "You no sleep much," she said softly. "Could say the same for you," he replied, kneeling to stoke the fire. "I hear storm. Think maybe roof fall." He gave a faint smile. "If it falls, we'll rebuild it. Wouldn't be the first time." Her gaze lingered on him a moment longer before she spoke again. "The man who come yesterday, you trust him?" "Caleb." He shrugged. "As much as anyone. He's not cruel, just curious. But word travels fast, and men talk faster when they drink." Ayanna looked down, her fingers twisting the edge of the blanket. "If men come, they take me again." "No," he said too quickly. Then, quieter, "Not while I'm standing." It wasn't just something he said to calm her. He meant it. Somewhere between that frozen night by the river and this morning's silence, his sense of duty had turned into something else, something heavier. Cole moved about the room, checking the windows, the latch on the door, the rifle hanging by the wall. He caught himself doing it again later that day, listening too often for sounds outside, glancing at the ridge line through the window. He hadn't realized until then how much his life had shifted in only a few weeks. The world beyond that cabin felt smaller now, meaner. He'd built his life on distance, distance from the war, from people, from the things he couldn't fix. But now there was someone inside his walls who needed him to stay close. By noon, the storm broke. The light changed, soft and gold against the snow. He went to the shed and came back carrying a rough wooden frame. "What that?" Ayanna asked. "Something I've been working on," he said, setting it near her. "Figured you could use some freedom." It was a small chair with handles, rough but sturdy. He'd fashioned it from scrap lumber, attaching small wheels from an old plow. "You can move easier with it," he explained. Her eyes widened as she ran her hand along the edge of the wood. "You make for me?" "Seemed about time," he said, awkward under her stare. "You shouldn't have to drag yourself everywhere." She looked at the chair, then at him. "You kind man, Cole Madron." He shook his head. "Just a man who can build." Still, when he helped her into the chair and she rolled forward for the first time, the sound of her quiet laugh filled the cabin in a way he hadn't heard before. It caught him off guard, made something inside him loosen. She moved around the room, slow but determined, touching things she'd only seen from her cot, the shelf of tools, the window frame, the stack of books by the door. She stopped beside the window, looking out at the endless white. "I forget we're all big," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "It's not as big as it used to be." "Why you stay here?" she asked suddenly. "You strong man. You could live anywhere." Cole leaned against the wall, thinking about that. "I used to think peace meant running from everything. Turns out, running just makes you tired." She nodded slowly, understanding more than he expected. "You find peace here?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Maybe starting to." The day passed quiet. He worked on patching the roof while she prepared stew. Their movements had fallen into a rhythm that felt natural, like they'd been sharing space much longer than a few weeks. When he came back inside, the smell of cooking filled the cabin, rich and warm. They ate together by the fire. For the first time since she'd arrived, she didn't look like a stranger in his home. The blanket draped around her shoulders looked like it belonged there. Her face had color again. "Your people," he said after a while. "You think I'll look for you?" She shook her head. "They say I dead. Spirit already gone. If they see me now, they turn away." "Then you're free," he said. She looked at him, serious. "Free, but nowhere to go." He met her eyes. "Then you stay here, till you decide otherwise." She studied him a long moment, as if weighing the truth in his voice. Then she nodded once. "I stay." The fire crackled between them. Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving the world still and white. Cole leaned back in his chair, watching her hands rest calm on the blanket, the faint light from the fire painting her skin in amber. It hit him then how quiet the world had become, and how much that quiet meant now. There was no loneliness in it, no ache, just the steady sound of breathing, the crack of wood, and the feeling of something new taking root. Ayanna caught him looking and gave a faint, knowing smile. He looked away, pretending to adjust the stove, but his heart thudded harder than it should have. The night settled slow. When she finally drifted to sleep, Cole sat there a long time, staring at the fire until it burned low. He thought of the life he'd lived before her. Empty days, empty nights, a man waiting for nothing. Then he looked toward the cot where she slept, her dark hair spread across the pillow, and he realized the waiting was over. Whatever came next, town rumors, trouble, snow, or silence, he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't letting her face it alone. The days after the storm passed with a strange calm. The snow outside had hardened into a white crust that caught the morning light like glass. Inside, the cabin breathed differently now. The air no longer felt like it belonged to one man. There were 2 mugs by the stove, 2 sets of footprints near the door, 2 lives circling each other in quiet rhythm. Cole had always worked with purpose, but lately that purpose had shifted. He wasn't just keeping himself alive anymore. He was making sure Ayanna had what she needed. He brought in water, chopped wood, and set traps for rabbit. She prepared food, repaired clothes, and kept the fire steady. Their world had narrowed down to survival and silence, and somehow that felt right. Listeners might have wondered whether anyone had come looking for her, her tribe, the townsfolk, someone from her past. Cole had wondered too, every time the wind carried a sound that didn't belong. But weeks passed without a sign. The river below was frozen at its edges, the nearest road buried. It was as if the world had sealed them off, leaving them to themselves. One evening, while Cole repaired his saddle strap, Ayanna spoke quietly. "You not ask what I think of you." He looked up, surprised. "Didn't think I had to." "You think I afraid," she said. "First days, yes. You quiet man. Always look like storm ahead. But you no hurt me. No even once." Cole's jaw tightened slightly. "You've seen men who did." Her eyes darkened. "Too many." She paused, fingers tracing the seam of the blanket. "Before the river, there was one man who said he loved me. After I fall from horse, he called me broken thing. Say no woman if no walk. He tell others I cursed. That's why they turn." Cole's grip on the strap stopped. He didn't speak for a while. When he did, his voice was low. Sounds like he was the one cursed. She studied his face, her eyes soft but sharp. "You not believe in curse?" He shook his head. "I've seen bad men and good men. Seen storms and war. Never saw a curse do a damn thing that people didn't do first." Something in her expression changed. Part relief, part wonder. "You different kind," she said quietly. He leaned back in the chair. "Don't know about that. Just tired of watching people get thrown away." The next morning, he woke early to find her already up, sitting near the window in her chair. The sky was gray, and frost laced the glass. She was sewing something small and careful. Pieces of his old shirt she'd cut into strips. When he asked what she was doing, she said, "You always fix things. Now I fix you one." She held up what looked like a small pouch stitched tight with leather thread. "For your tobacco," she said. He took it from her hand, rough fingers brushing hers for just a moment. "That's good work." She smiled faintly. "You keep, so you not forget, woman, you save." He looked at her, the weight of her words sinking deeper than he expected. "I couldn't forget if I tried." As the day wore on, he busied himself checking traps along the tree line. When he returned, he found her reading one of his old books, her brow furrowed as she traced the words with her finger. "You read English?" he asked, surprised. "Learn from missionary woman," she said without looking up. "Long time ago. Before tribe, send her away." He crouched beside her, pointing a line in the book. "That word there, it means freedom." She repeated it softly, as if testing how it felt on her tongue. "Freedom." Then she smiled, small but certain. "I like that word." That night, they ate by the fire, the room warm despite the cold pressing against the walls. The talk drifted to small things, the smell of the pines after rain, the way coyotes called at night. She asked about the scars on his hands, and he told her bits of his past he hadn't said out loud in years. About the war, about losing men he'd called brothers, about how silence was the only thing that ever answered back. "You think you're done with fighting?" she said after a while. "I thought so," he admitted, "but maybe fighting just changes shape. These days, it's not men I'm fighting, it's myself." She reached out slowly and placed her hand over his, her fingers warm against the rough of his knuckles. He didn't move. Neither spoke. The fire popped once, throwing light across the floor. For the first time in years, Cole didn't feel the weight of his past pressing down. He felt something steady instead, like the ground had stopped shifting beneath him. Outside, the night deepened. A cold wind slid down the ridge, brushing against the cabin walls, but inside the air stayed warm. Ayana's hand stayed on his. When she finally withdrew it, he felt the absence like a pulse. Before he turned in for the night, he checked the door one last time. The wind had picked up again, the kind that carried sound far, somewhere beyond the ridge. He thought he heard the echo of hooves, faint, distant, but real. He stood there for a long while listening. Then he looked back at her, sleeping by the fire, and something in his chest tightened. Trouble might be coming, but he knew one thing for sure. Whatever it was, he wasn't running from it this time. The river had taken one life from her and nearly claimed his peace along with it. But now, standing in that cabin's quiet light, Cole Madron knew exactly what he was willing to fight for. By dawn, the sound of hooves was no longer a dream. Cole had heard them again just before sunrise, closer this time, steady and deliberate. Whoever was riding was not lost. He stood by the window, the rifle in his hands, his breath clouding the glass as he watched the ridge below. The tracks were faint through the snow, but there were at least 2 horses, maybe 3, moving slow along the frozen riverbank. He watched until they vanished into the tree line, then turned toward the fire where Ayana was stirring awake. She saw the rifle first, then his face. "Someone come." He nodded once. Could be nothing. Could be men from Pine Ford. "I don't like it either way." Her eyes darkened. "They look for me?" "Don't know yet," he said. "But if they are, they'll find the wrong cabin to knock on." He tried to sound steady, but the weight in his voice gave him away. The people of Pine Ford weren't known for mercy, especially toward Apache. They called it justice when it suited them and savagery when it didn't. If word had spread that Cole Madron, a man already half an outsider, was harboring one, it would draw attention he didn't want. He moved through the cabin, checking the door, the window latches, the back wall where he'd patched old bullet holes years ago. His hands shook only slightly. Ayana watched him in silence, her eyes following every motion. "You fight before," she said quietly. He looked at her. "Too many times." She nodded, understanding without asking. "You not want fight again?" "No," he said, "but I will if I have to." While he loaded the rifle, she turned her chair toward him. "If men come, I hide." He shook his head. "No. If anyone comes, they'll see we got nothing to hide. You're here because I want you here. That's the truth." Ayana stared at him for a long time. "You risked your life for me." "Why?" Cole stopped what he was doing. For a moment, all he could hear was the ticking of the stove, metal cooling. "Because it's the right damn thing," he said quietly. And because I'd rather die doing something that matters than live like I used to, pretending I didn't care who got left behind. That answer hung heavy in the small room. She looked down, her voice barely a whisper. Then I hope they never find us. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The day moved slow after that. The wind outside carried no new sounds, but both of them stayed tense. Cole stepped out only once to gather wood. When he returned, she had prepared coffee and laid out 2 bowls of stew. He could tell by the look in her eyes that she understood more than he said, that she knew what was coming and that she wasn't afraid. As evening fell, he told her the story she'd never asked for but probably wondered about since the day he found her. "You asked once why I came out here," he said. "Why live alone?" She nodded, watching him from her chair. "I used to ride with men who were paid to kill other men. Didn't matter why, didn't matter who. I told myself I was doing it for a reason, money, justice, some kind of order. But I was just running from the noise in my own head. One job went bad. My friend, closest thing I had to a brother, took a bullet meant for me. After that, I rode west and kept going until there was no one left to bury." He rubbed a hand across his jaw. "Thought I could live quiet up here. But quiet don't fix what's broken. It just makes you forget it's still there." Ayanna didn't interrupt. When he finished, she said softly, "You fix me, maybe I fix you." He met her gaze. "You already did." The quiet that followed wasn't heavy. It was the kind that settles between people who finally said what needed saying. That night, snow started again, faint at first and then thicker, muffling every sound outside. Cole sat near the fire while Ayanna slept, the rifle leaning by his chair. But he didn't feel the same kind of fear anymore. If those riders came, he'd deal with them. He wasn't protecting a secret. He was protecting his home. Near midnight, the dogs barked from the shed. Cole stood, heart tightening. Through the frost-blurred window, he saw 2 shapes approaching, the glow of lanterns moving between the trees. He crossed the room in 2 strides and checked the rifle. "Stay here," he told her. "Cole," she said softly, "please not kill." He gave her a look that was half promise, half warning. "Only if they make me." He stepped outside into the cold, his boots crunching over snow. The wind hit his face like glass. 2 men were coming up the ridge, one on horseback, one leading another horse behind him. The closer they came, the more he recognized the man in front, Caleb Trask, the traitor. Cole lowered the rifle slightly. "You've got a habit of showing up uninvited, Caleb." The older man raised a hand. "Didn't come for trouble. Came to warn you. Couple of deputies from Pine Ford are heading this way. They heard talk you're harboring a woman from the reservation. Said they're coming to check." Cole's jaw tightened. "How long?" "Tomorrow morning, maybe sooner," Caleb said. "They're drinking first. You know how that goes." Cole nodded, his mind already turning over options. "Appreciate the warning." Caleb hesitated before leaving. "Cole, I don't know what's going on between you and that woman, but if she's innocent, you better have proof. Pineford ain't kind to men who take in outsiders." Cole's voice came out flat. "She's not an outsider here." Caleb gave him one long look, then turned his horse back down the trail. When the sound of hooves faded, Cole went back inside. Ayanna was still awake, her eyes fixed on the door. "They come." He nodded. "Tomorrow." Her voice trembled slightly. "They take me away." "No," he said. "I won't let them." "Then they kill you," she said. He knelt beside her, his hand resting lightly on hers. "Then they'll have to earn it." Her fingers tightened around his. "I not want you die for me." He looked up at her, his voice steady. "You gave me something to live for again. That's not dying, Ayanna. That's living right for the first time." The wind pressed against the cabin walls, carrying a low, distant thunder. He didn't know if it was the storm or the echo of horses on frozen ground. But either way, he knew what tomorrow would bring. He spent the rest of the night preparing, moving the rifle near the window, checking the fire, securing the door. When he finally sat down beside her again, her eyes were open, watching him. "You tired?" he asked. "No," she said softly. "I think maybe peace before storm. I feel it here." She pressed a hand to her chest. He nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Neither of them slept. When the first light of morning broke over the ridge, the snow was still falling, slow, quiet, endless. And down below, the faint shapes of riders appeared through the fog. 3 this time, moving toward the cabin with purpose. Cole stood, his hand tightening around the rifle. The sound of hooves grew louder, clearer. He took one last look at Ayanna. She met his eyes, calm and unflinching and whispered, "I stay." "I know," he said. As the horses stopped outside, Cole stepped to the door. Whatever ghosts of his past still lived in him, whatever guilt he carried, they fell silent now. All that mattered was the woman by the fire, the life they'd built out of nothing, and the fact that for the first time in years, he wasn't running from a fight. He was standing for something worth saving. The knock came hard against the wood. Cole exhaled once, slow, and opened the door. The door swung open to the gray morning, and 3 men stood outside, their horses breathing steam into the cold. Snow clung to their hats and coats, and their boots sank deep into the drift. The man in front wore a deputy's badge pinned crooked to his vest, his face red from drink and cold alike. The other 2 hung back, rifles slung across their shoulders. Cole didn't move from the doorway. "Morning," the deputy said, his tone hard, suspicious. "Name's Briggs. You Cole Madron?" "I am," Cole said evenly. Briggs glanced over his shoulder toward the cabin, eyes narrowing as if he could see through the walls. "We heard you got company up here. Apache woman. Folks in Pine Ford are curious if that's true." Cole's voice stayed calm. "You rode all this way to gossip." Briggs gave a humorless grin. "Not gossip, Madron. Law. There's been trouble near the reservation. Livestock gone missing, traps cut, even a fire set near one of the mining camps. Apache tracks all over the place. If you got one here, she's going to answer some questions." Cole's hand tightened on the edge of the door, but his face stayed blank. "You're barking up the wrong ridge. Ain't been any Apache around here since winter started." Briggs tilted his head. "That's so? Mind if we look inside, just to be sure?" "You got a warrant?" "Don't need one," Briggs said, stepping forward. "Not when it's tribal business." Cole blocked his way. The air between them thickened. "You step through that door uninvited, and you'll find it's not tribal business anymore. It's mine." For a long moment, nobody moved. Snow hissed softly against the roofs, and the horses shifted behind them, stamping at the cold. The 2 men behind Briggs looked uneasy, like they didn't want this to turn ugly. Briggs spat into the snow. "You always were a hard bastard, Madron. Heard stories about you from the war. Men said you'd rather shoot than talk." Cole's eyes didn't flinch. "Depends who's asking." Briggs smiled thinly, but there was no humor in it. "You got till sundown to change your mind. If she's here when we come back, she's coming with us. You think about that." He turned his horse, motioning to the others, and they rode off through the snow, their silhouettes fading into the trees. Cole watched until they disappeared, then shut the door slow, his breath fogging in the cold air. Ayanna was still by the fire, her eyes wide, her hands gripping the arms of her chair. "They take me," she whispered. "Not if I can help it," he said. "But they'll be back." She swallowed hard. "If I leave now, they stop. They forget." He shook his head. "You won't make a mile in this cold. And they won't forget. They'll just come for both of us later." She looked down, voice trembling. "You fight them. They kill you. I don't want this." Cole crouched beside her. "You listen to me. You didn't do anything wrong. They're looking for someone to blame. That's all. Men like that. They don't need proof, just someone weaker to point at. You stay here. I'll handle them." She stared at him, tears brimming in her eyes, but not falling. "You know, afraid to die?" He gave a small, tired smile. "I've been afraid of a lot of things in my life. Dying stopped being one of them a long time ago." She reached for his hand, fingers trembling but strong. "Then I afraid for you." He looked down at her hand, her skin warm against his, and for a moment, the world outside stopped existing. He spent the next hours preparing, not for a fight, but for a chance. He checked the rifle, the revolver, and the rounds. He gathered food, packed a small bag, and brought in more wood for the fire. Ayanna watched him, saying nothing. She knew what it meant. When night came, the wind dropped. The snow had stopped falling, leaving the sky clear and sharp. Cole sat by the window, eyes fixed on the valley below, waiting for the flicker of lanterns. They came just past midnight, 3 of them again, their lights moving slow and steady up the ridge. He stood, grabbed his rifle, and looked at her. "Stay quiet. Don't move from that chair." She nodded, her face pale in the firelight. When the knock came, it wasn't polite this time. It was the hard, flat sound of men who'd already decided how the night would end. Cole opened the door halfway. Briggs stood there again, face tight with cold and anger. "Didn't figure you'd do the smart thing," he said. Cole's voice stayed low. "I told you there's no one here you need to see." Briggs shifted his coat, revealing the pistol at his side. "Move, Madron." Cole didn't. Behind him, the fire popped. One of the other men craned his neck, trying to see inside. "There's someone in there," he said. Briggs's mouth twisted. So it's true. He reached for the door, and that was all it took. Cole stepped forward, his hand slamming the door open hard enough to knock Briggs back a step. The rifle came up, not fired, just leveled. "You got 3 seconds to turn around and get off this ridge," Cole said, voice cold as the air. "You come any closer, and you won't make it to your horses." Briggs's men hesitated. The second one muttered, "Let's go, Sam. Ain't worth it." But Briggs wasn't the kind to back down. "You think you can stand against the law?" he hissed. Cole's voice didn't rise. "You're not the law out here. You're just another man with a gun." They stared at each other, the tension stretched thin as wire. Finally, Briggs spat again, his breath a cloud in the cold. "You'll regret this, Madron." He turned, motioning his men to follow. They mounted their horses and rode off, disappearing into the black ridge below. Cole stayed in the doorway long after they were gone, rifle still in his hands, until the only sound left was the wind. Inside, Ayanna was crying quietly, not from fear, but from something deeper, a grief that had no words. "They come again," she said softly. "Maybe," he answered, "but not tonight." She looked at him, tears streaking her cheeks. "You protect me like I'm worth something." "You are," he said. "Don't let anyone tell you different." She reached out, and he came closer, kneeling beside her. She touched his face gently, fingers tracing the scar at his temple. "You fight for me," she whispered. "No one fight for me before." Cole caught her hand and held it there. "Then I guess it's about time." The cabin was silent except for the fire crackling. The storm outside had gone, but inside, something else had settled, a fragile peace born from defiance. She leaned forward then, her breath trembling. He didn't move away. Her fingers brushed his jaw, and when she spoke, her voice was barely more than a breath. "You don't need save me anymore. I stay because I want." Cole's chest tightened, the kind of feeling he hadn't let himself have in years. He reached up, his rough hand against her cheek. "Then stay," he said quietly. She closed the space between them, her lips finding his. It wasn't rushed or desperate. It was real, grounded, alive. The kind of kiss that made every scar and silence worth it. When they finally broke apart, her forehead rested against his. "You not alone now?" she said softly. He nodded, eyes still closed. "No, I'm not." Outside, the snow glittered in the pale moonlight. The danger wasn't gone, but for that night, the world had gone still. Inside the small cabin on the ridge, 2 broken souls had finally stopped running, from death, from fear, from themselves. Whatever came with the dawn, they would face it together. The morning came slow, pale, and cold, the light creeping over the snow like a thin sheet of silver. The air outside was silent. No voices, no horses, no trace of the men who had come the night. Cole stood by the window, watching the line of the ridge for any sign of movement. His rifle leaned against the wall beside him, his jaw tight, but his eyes steady. He had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard that knock again, saw Briggs's face, red and twisted with arrogance. But now, in the quiet dawn, nothing stirred except the smoke curling from the chimney and the faint crackle of the fire behind him. Ayanna was awake, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, eyes following him quietly. "They gone," she said, her voice hoarse from the night before. "For now," Cole answered. He turned from the window, walking toward her. She looked different in the morning light, stronger somehow, even with the blanket drawn around her shoulders. "You think they come back?" she asked. He hesitated before answering. "Maybe. Men like that don't like being told no. But if they do, I'll be ready." Her brow furrowed. "You can't fight whole town, Cole Madron." He gave a faint smile. "Never tried fighting a whole town before. But I'll fight for what's mine." She looked at him for a long moment, and then, quietly, "I am yours." The question caught him off guard. He set his hat down on the table and crouched beside her. "Not because you owe me, not because I saved you. You're yours, Ayanna. But if you choose to stay here, if you want this life with me, then yeah, you're mine in every way that matters." Her eyes filled with tears, not of fear, but of something deeper, recognition, relief, love she didn't know how to name. She reached for his hand. Then I stay. Cole nodded, gripping her hand in both of his. Then we start new. That morning they worked together as if nothing had happened. He carried water from the well, brought in more firewood, and cleared the snow from the shed roof. Ayana moved slowly around the cabin in the chair he had built her, mending his torn shirts, cooking breakfast, keeping herself busy like she belonged there. And she did. For the first time since the river, laughter filled the cabin, small, quiet, but real. She teased him when he burned the bread, and he smirked when she scolded him for tracking snow across the floor. The tension that had hung between them for weeks eased like thawing ice. Yet beneath it all, both of them knew this peace was fragile. Sooner or later, someone would ride up that ridge again. By midday, the sun broke through, warming the snow just enough to make it sparkle. Cole decided to ride down toward the ridge to see if Briggs and his men had camped nearby. He saddled his horse, checking the cinch strap twice. "I'll be gone an hour," he told her. "Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me." Ayana nodded, but caught his sleeve before he could turn away. "You come back," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Promise." He rested a hand on her cheek. "I'll come back." She watched him ride off until he disappeared through the pines. The cabin fell silent again, except for the wind. She waited, eyes fixed on the window, heart pounding at every sound. It was nearly an hour later when she saw him returning, but not alone. Another rider trailed behind, older, riding slow. For a moment, her chest seized with fear. Then she saw Caleb's coat. Cole dismounted first, helping the trader down. When they stepped inside, Caleb tipped his hat toward Ayana. "Didn't mean to worry you, miss. Thought Madarin might like to know Pine Fords had its fill of trouble. Briggs won't be back." Cole frowned. "What happened?" Caleb sighed. "Briggs tried to raise men to come after you. Sheriff told him to leave it be. Said the county's got bigger problems than one quiet cowboy keeping to himself. Heard Briggs rode east last night, mad as hell." Cole leaned back against the wall, the breath he'd been holding finally easing out. "So it's done." "Looks that way," Caleb said. "I told the sheriff the woman you've got here's no danger to anyone." He didn't care enough to argue. Ayana looked from one man to the other, still processing the words. "He not come back?" "No," Cole said. "You're safe now." Caleb stayed for coffee, trading a few supplies before heading back down the ridge. When the door closed behind him, the silence felt different, lighter, freer. Ayana wheeled her chair closer to the window, watching the sky brighten above the snow. "So no one chase us now?" "No one," Cole said. She looked at him, the corners of her lips turning up slowly. "Then we live here, yes? Not just hide." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, we live." In the days that followed, the air softened. The snow began to melt around the edges of the cabin, and birds returned to the trees. Cole repaired the barn roof, patched the fence, and built a small ramp so she could move outside when the ground dried. Each night, they sat by the fire, speaking more than they used to, about her childhood by the Verde River, about the brother she'd lost in a raid, about the sound of rain in the desert. He told her about the war, about the people he couldn't save, about the long, quiet years after. She listened, never judging, never asking for more than he could give. As spring came, the land came alive again. Wildflowers pushed through the thawing ground, and the river ran fast but clean. One morning, Cole found her by the porch, gripping the railing with her hands. She had managed to pull herself from the chair, her legs trembling, her arms shaking with effort. "Hey," he said, stepping forward, but she held up a hand. "I try," she said through clenched teeth. "I stand today." He moved closer, one arm ready, but not touching her until she nodded. Slowly, she found her balance, her knees locking just enough to hold her weight. She swayed once, twice, then steadied. He caught his breath. "You're doing it." Her eyes filled with tears, but she smiled, real, radiant. "I'll walk again one day." He felt something break loose in his chest, something he hadn't let himself feel in years. He pulled her close, holding her tight, her arms strong around his neck. "You will," he said quietly. "You already are." That evening, they sat together on the porch, the sun bleeding gold across the hills. The river below whispered through the rocks, the same river that had tried to take her life and now carried the sound of peace. Ayana leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "You saved me once," she said. "Now we save each other." He wrapped his arm around her, his voice low. That's how it's supposed to be. The wind shifted, carrying the smell of pine and thawed earth. The cabin behind them glowed with the fire inside. And for the first time since either of them could remember, there was nothing to run from, nothing to fear. Cole looked out over the land that had once been nothing but dust and silence, and saw life again, his herd grazing, smoke curling gently into the sky, and Ayanna beside him, alive, smiling, and home. He didn't need words to know what it meant. The ridge, the river, the woman, it was all one now. Everything broken in him had found its place. As the last light faded, she whispered, "You think we stay here forever?" He smiled, "As long as the river runs." And in that small cabin above the Verde, with the fire warm behind them and the sound of the world steady and alive again, Cole Madron finally found what he had been chasing all his life. Peace that didn't come from running, but from staying. The river had taken her once. Now it carried their story forward, calm and endless, into a world that had finally forgiven them both.